Some NLP techniques, language patterns, a sleight of mouth to handle a verbal conflict. You have been facing verbal conflicts in your life. Some of them maybe you have been able to argue correctly and prove people wrong or assert your point of view, and some of them probably you haven't been able to articulate a clear point of view or you haven't been able to win over the discussion. It is happening to everybody once in a while, and I think we should be better at picking our fights instead of trying to get into every fight under the sun. But for you here, pretending you have a legit cause to defend when you are arguing with somebody, here are 3 techniques from the sleight of mouth model developed by Robert Dills, even if he took a lot of inspiration from the general logic model, where they would study consequences and inferences, stuff like that, rhetoric concepts from Aristotle, all those people. But he built that into a language model that is, I think, already simpler to use than traditional logic. And what I am doing also in my courses on sleight of mouth, stuff like that, is to even break it down on smaller things, just normal language patterns you can use every time you are interacting with somebody, even when you have a client in therapy, to make them change on the limiting belief they have and you want to make them get better. First things first, number 1, we want to gather more information. So this is the general sleight of mouth model, and you may have seen it before. Usually when people see that with all the examples of language inside, they just puke on the table and like, this is way too complex, I can never study that. So here is for you a simplification of where to start with this model. In the beginning of an interaction, whether you are a life coach, a hypnotherapist helping your clients, or you are into a debate, an argument, and you want to solve a conflict, the beginning on that model, I think from experience, I could be wrong, but I think the best is to use the chunk down and the frame size. So what do we mean by that? Chunking down is pretty straightforward. It means clarifying, deconstructing, breaking down information. How do you know that? What do you mean by that? Can you clarify this point? Can you express more on your point of view about this? Can you clarify when did this happen? How do you know that this thing is different from this one? You're just going to clarify as many smaller things of the situation so that you have more understanding of the specific point of view or the specific emotional baggage the person may have about the topic at hand. And the frame size is basically what else is there. What else has threat to this situation? The frame size is also matching with other part of this model, but I will just keep it simple here. So frame size is about what else. Who else, for example, is involved in the situation you are talking about? Who else is involved? Who else has been affected by this thing you are mentioning, talking about? What other behaviors have threat to this? You say you are pissed off about this, and would there be anything else, or would you have any other name to call that? Has there been another person who has been pissing you off, for example? You just want to gather as many information as possible so that you are hitting right. When you will reframe or throw some hypnotic language patterns, you just want to hit right. And without a very accurate, clear understanding of the whole situation and a really clear understanding of all the concepts mentioned by the person in front of you, it might be tricky to actually point exactly the limiting belief they have. Then number 2, once you have a clear understanding, and you know you have a clear understanding basically when rapport is built. When you say something, the person is doing head nodding, or the person agrees with something you said, or the person is getting more agitated and alive when you ask a question, they are giving you more details. That means the rapport is starting to build up and you can accelerate toward the end of the discussion. Or if it is really infuriated, if it is really a conflict, at least the person is calmed down compared to the very beginning of the discussion where the person might have been angry, upset, and like loud and like not really happy. And you know you are at the rapport phase. You have ended phase 1 of this this video, when the person is at least talking a bit slower, a bit smoother, they are a bit less aggressive. That's where you can start to talk about solutions or positive compromises. If you try to throw a compromise or a solution too early in the conversation, it might be too resisted because you haven't been acknowledging the actual source of the disagreement or the problem or the limiting belief or the emotional wound or whatever it is. So the second step here is to use, I would say, the easiest ones from this whole model. The easiest ones are the intention pattern and the consequence pattern. Maybe not the best ones, but I would say the easiest. When you're not extremely advanced in persuasive linguistics, I would say those are the really easiest ones that can really slip into most conversations, if not all conversations. Intentions is basically what you have figured out when you have been doing phase one correctly, when you have been gathering information, asking how do you know that, when did this start in your life, or who is the person who told you this or that. Then you have enough information to go into an intention pattern, which is, for example, I understand you want to protect X or Y. I understand you want to protect this. What I am suggesting is that the best way to protect this thing you want to protect, your security, your feelings of being worthy, or you want to protect what you have earned, the best way to protect this is to do this, and you are actually proposing your solution, the thing you want to convince the person about. It can be extremely useful also in sales when you're linking the deep intention of the person you are interacting with. So they want protection for their kids, they want protection for themselves, they want to protect their assets. Once you have figured that out, you can tell them, from my experience, the best way to protect those assets you have acquired with so much difficulty is to actually invest into this plan. I wouldn't suggest in any way to try to sell things that don't legitimately help people. It will just backfire in your head somehow, someday. In some moments, you probably won't be waiting for it, but I would just not recommend that anyway. Use that in a positive way. Of course, you can use the intention pattern, linking what they want, the thing they are really after, the deepest thing they are after, which in most cases is coming down to recognition. They want to be recognized, they want to be acknowledged, they want to feel security, protection. It's mostly turning around those things all the time, or they want to avoid the past to repeat itself. If they have been wounded one time, they want to avoid it to be repeated another time. So just acknowledge their deep intention behind and link that intention with the thing you want to persuade them about. Then the consequence pattern is what is going to happen in the future. So you can notice it's very basic here. We are playing with time frames. We are playing with the past and with the future. Future consequences. The basic way of using that is to plant a very negative scenario into their head. So if you keep on portraying this behavior, this bad thing is going to happen in your future. And there are many NLP patterns turning around this idea, where, for example, some woman who might be abusive with cleaning the house nonstop, you might tell her, you know what, in your future, 5 years from now, if you close your eyes and picture that, what you're going to see is a house that is extremely well cleaned and that is empty. Because everybody left, because you're so abusive with everybody, with this obsession about cleaning everything, that your kids just left you. That is an example of a consequence pattern. Obviously, you're doing that with the intention of helping. You want to help people to figure out something negative that they are doing, and you want to help them improve. Just planting one negative thing that will happen in their life if they don't change. Quite often, we are unfortunately, more motivated by escaping what is bad than about going toward what is good. It is a bad thing. It is a terrible truth about human nature, but maybe not in every people, but in many people, the urgency of escaping something that is bad is a more powerful trigger, at least on the short term. It is a more powerful trigger than trying to go towards something that is good. It won't last on the long term though. For long-term motivation, you need something that is really positive for the future. However, to get an initial spark of motivation, to get people to move their ass and do something, it is more effective to actually talk to them about something terrible that's going to happen if they don't take action. And consequence patterns can also be used, therefore, in a positive way. In NLP, we have many techniques about future pacing, talking about what is going to be good once the person has changed. So once you have changed, this good thing might happen. You may find your dream partner to live the love life you have always dreamed of living, just stuff like that. Initially, it's more used in a negative way to trigger people out of their negative state. It can also be used with a positive sentence. Just adapt with the person you have in front of you. And number 3, last one, is for those, I would say, impossible cases. Normally, when you really master the intention pattern and the consequence pattern, and you can just switch between one and the other, you are being flexible, you say this, it doesn't work, you say that, you come back to checking down, how do you know this, what do you mean by that? You just switch from phase 1 and phase 2 in this video. Usually, when you master those, it's enough for most situations. For the rare situations where really nothing is working, you're just talking to a wall, basically, somebody who is closed to everything, every idea, completely stubborn. At the end, the only last asset you have is the meta frame. Going higher, meta frame is basically what is the whole context surrounding this discussion. The context is, for example, all the presuppositions that person has about you as a human being. Sometimes, for example, especially if you're maybe a bit young, people might talk down on you. They might talk to you as if you were just not important, not interesting, and there is nothing important that can come out of your mouth. That is kind of a meta frame. Or like a police officer. When a police officer talks to you, obviously he is implying, because there are social roles in society, he is or she is implying that they have some power over you, which socially speaking is kind of true. There might be bribes in some countries, but generally speaking it is true. The police officer has power over you. In those situations, okay, but in many situations, some people are giving themselves power over you, whereas they just don't have it. They are not a police officer, they are not a judge in the court and you're not being judged, but they are acting as if it was the case. And those are the situations you want to really grasp, pinpoint. Which situations do you have in your life where people are just pretending to have power over you, whereas there's no reason they should have that much? Maybe it is okay that they have a bit of power over you, if it is a parent, for example, but there is a limit to that, and the boundary is how bad do you feel. If you feel manipulated and used and abused every time somebody talks to you, at some point there is a limit you haven't set for yourself and for the other person. So the meta frame language patterns are always going to have to relate to something getting outside of the situation. Something like, you know what, I'm not somebody who can talk to you like this, I'm not a child, I'm not interested into hearing any more of your opinions on that. Goodbye. And you just end the confrontation in some really abrupt way. At some point when you're really in front of a toxic person, the end is just to leave. And you want to make sure that person understands that there is no more invitations possible for you in their life. A narcissist, for example, is always most likely going to try to get you back. They will try to get you back with some alluring messages or voicemails or just calls like, oh yeah, I apologize, I'm so sorry. But if it is a repeated behavior and some toxic person is always showing up in your life non-stop, and whenever they come back, it is the same story again, they just manipulate you again or make you feel used and abused again, at some point there is a meta frame implied here that you are agreeing with unconsciously because you're letting them come in non-stop, and you want to clarify what is the implied frame of that situation. In the main situation you have a conflict into, just clarify what is the presupposition, the underlying presupposition about your role in the conversation. For example, if somebody is really pissing me off, I will just get into the lawyer role. I will just get into as if I was in court. And I will start relentlessly questioning the person on their evidence for what they are presupposing to be true. And when you know the meta model, it's obviously easier to do that. And it's really like massive frame control. You're like, okay, you just tell I was such a wrong person because of this. How do you know that? You said I was wrong because my views on money are just unproven. Okay. If mine is unproven, what's your proof? What's your evidence? No, you are the one attacking me, so what is your evidence? I don't agree with anything that has to relate to some obscure book or forum you have heard about 5 years ago. What is right now in your life or in the life of people directly around you a proof or evidence of what you are talking about? Tell me right now. And with this kind of frame, at some point the person is just going to give up. They're just going to say, oh yeah, you just don't understand. Yeah, okay, fine, so leave me alone. At some point, why are you giving time to people who are just toxic to you? You need to have a situation around you with people who are supporting you. If the meta frame implying the situations you are living every day is always about you being a victim and other people having power over you, at which point did you accept and agree upon that without knowing it? Because people never allow themselves to talk to you like a piece of shit, talk to you like that, if you have shown yourself to not be part of this meta frame anymore. It can be done by challenging them on the evidence they have, or calling them out, calling their bullshit out for something they have taken into consideration as being absolute truth. But how do they know this is absolute truth? Debates about religion might be tricky because it's like a more complicated topic. But if it is anything other than religion, then what evidence do they have? Specifically, how do they know this is true or this is wrong, or that you are wrong, or that you should behave like that, you should be a good person like this? Just challenge them. And obviously this is an extreme one. This is really when you have already, this is for when you have already tried the chunking down, elaborating compromises, talking about their intention. This one is just to be used when really nothing else has worked and you just want to, at this point you're done, that person, you're done with them, you don't want anything else to have to do with them, you're out and you're just explaining, you're just showing to them they won't have any more bind, they won't have any more clothes on you anymore, it's done, you're out.